or I call on anyone who wants to ask a second question. All good? Timekeeper ready? Okay.
Thank you, John. So thank you to John for hosting. Thank you to Blackrock Library for. Is it? Do you need this?
Yes.
You guys can do? Okay.
Oh, one other thing. Let's give the candidates a little break. And then let's endeavor to give them a hand again. And in between.
So thank you, John. Thank you to the Blackrock Library for hosting. Thank you to Pete and Christina for the conversation. Thank you guys all for showing up. These forums are always an important part of any campaign. I grew up in a family that prized public service, that prized community. My mother was the environmental planner in tree warden in Guilford, where I grew up and where she grew up as well. It seemed like every night she was at a board or commission meeting, so I know the schedule. We joked that I have a meeting tonight would be her epitaph. My father has taught English at Brian High School in Norwalk for close to 30 years. And when I went to Fairfield Prep, this lifestyle of service, this lifestyle of giving back, was instilled in me further. Probably the most impactful weekend of my life was what we called an urban plunge, where a group of us juniors went into the east end of Bridgeport, lived there for just a weekend, lived off a poverty budget, did a couple community service projects, which was all superficial and fine, but what really got to me was what's called the champagne glass economy, in which the vast majority of the world's wealth is concentrated among a very few at the top. The image, the graph, the resulting graph looks like a champagne glass, which is ironic and somewhat appropriately so, but that image has always stuck with me. I always knew that professionally, I wanted to do something that was impactful as well. So right out of grad school, I got a job working on a first selectmen's campaign up in Southbury, where my mom lives. And a few campaign cycles later, I have had the honor and the privilege of working with a number of great public servants and become close friends with many of those public servants as well. Jim Himes is one and his staff, and we have a great one here in Steve Sashram and Senator Moore as well, who understands the best public servants understand that it is the best public servants have a philosophy that you have to put partisanship and rhetoric and ideology aside to focus on what truly matters. Two things: serving one's constituents and being their voice, and working with others to get the best possible policy outcomes for your community. The first one of those is simple. You listen to people, you figure out how you can help, and you work to take care of their problems and represent their views. The second one is trickier because it involves compromise, it involves putting egos aside, and it involves reaching across the table or the aisle or whatever separates you to understand where your opposition is coming from. You may think all your ideas are great and you have all the answers, but the person sitting on the other side of the table thinks the exact same thing. And when it comes down to it, you're going to need to understand their point of view, understand what they want, work with them and others to accomplish your own goals. That's the mentality needed from a city councilor. That's in particular the mentality needed from a city councilor here in the 130th, and that's the mentality that I want to bring to the city council. There's been a little bit of chatter out there that I am relatively new to Bridgeport and Blackrock. That is true. But Blackrock, you can live here for 40 or 60 or 50 years and still be called a newcomer. The fact is that Connecticut is hemorrhaging young professionals. But after living in Europe for a while, in Asia, I wanted to come back home to my home state and work to stem that tide. We have to make Bridgeport and Connecticut more attractive to millennials, like myself, by bringing jobs, investing in our community, and enhancing our quality of life. In the City Council, I would work every day to improve the lives of those that already call this city home, whether that be decreasing the tax burden on property owners, making sure a pothole gets filled, and fight to make this city an economic engine. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak with you. I'm happy to be here with my partner, Rowan Kane, as the endorsed Democrats for the 130th District. Thanks also to John Soltis, our Black Rock librarian, for taking the time to host the event, and to my wife, Claire, and my son, Colin, who are here with us. It's been an honor to serve as your City Council representative. I'm proud of my record, and I want to share some of the details of the work I've been doing on behalf of you in this one of the most diverse districts in the state of Connecticut. Let me start by saying that, like you, I want Bridgeport to be a thriving city with quality schools, sought-after neighborhoods, and a vibrant economy. I want this city to prosper. Unfortunately, the problems facing Bridgeport are long-standing and run very deep for a post-industrial city in a state with a struggling economy. We're all aware of this. Addressing the systemic root causes of what has gotten us here is not easy, but can be accomplished through vision, hard work, and pragmatic solutions, all of which I work for as your councilman. My efforts have spanned many areas, including fiscal responsibility, education, development, sustainability, and citizen advocacy. As budget co-chair, I've worked tirelessly to contain overspending from this administration, identify new revenue sources, enhance transparency into the city finances, and to seek best practices to help solve the city's long-term debt solutions. I've led the fight to increase funding for our public schools and to help retain our best teachers. That's the key to our positive growth in education. As the council liaison to the Bridgeport Chamber of Commerce, I have continued for the push of economic development in this city and the region, and we're beginning to see those results. And I've sat on key committees on the council and beyond and partnered with many organizations across the city to improve education, enhance social services, foster innovation and development, and ensure the safety of our neighborhoods. I'm happy to talk about my record and look forward to sharing more specifics. With that said, I also want to set the record straight on some of the concerns raised by my opponents. First, we're all angry about the taxes that we're facing. But I am not responsible for the mill rate increase that we've experienced, and I am not responsible for the taxes that came along with it. To suggest otherwise is simply disingenuous. Our tax increase came from a state-mandated property revaluation that reduced the value of the city's grand list and reapportioned taxes to the most prosperous neighborhood in the city, Black Rock. That's a fact. The reval was unavoidable, and the first in the city since the Great Recession wreaked havoc on home properties across the country. The mill rate increase would have happened regardless of who is sitting on City Council for the 130th District or any seat on the City Council. In fact, I'll remind you that I campaigned to postpone the reval one more year, a plea that was outright rejected by the Gannon administration in the first week of their office. Secondly, my opponents have characterized me as a Gannon puppet or whatever term you wish to use. I'm part of the so-called machine. Nothing could be further from the truth. And it's actually kind of funny because if you were to ask Joe Gannon which council member gives him the most headaches, pushes back the hardest, asks the most questions, it is without a doubt he'll name me first. And you would never describe me as his advocate, nor would my fellow council members, whether they're pro or anti-Gannon. And how would they describe me? Well, they would look at me and they say, Scott is a pragmatic, level-headed leader, fighting hard day in and day out for a better Bridgeport. And that's why I'm here, to serve you. I'm not in this for myself or for my ego. I come from a long line of public servants who instilled in me the value of civic leadership, being a good neighbor, and the importance of giving back. I'm grateful for the opportunity to represent you, and having forged positive, effective relationships across the city and beyond will continue to serve you with your best interests at heart. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining us. Again, my name is Christina Smith, and I'm a petitioning candidate along with Pete Spain for City Council in the 130th District. A child of Jamaican parents who both came here independently for a better life, I was born and spent most of my childhood in Bridgeport, growing up on the east side, but I've lived on and off in this district for over 20 years, 13 of those as a homeowner, longer than all three of my fellow panelists combined. Though I have lived in cities such as San Francisco, New York, and London, I returned to Bridgeport 4 years ago because of my desire, and I would say childhood dream, to be a part of bringing back the glory and prosperity that Bridgeport once had. In addition to my passion, my candidacy for the role as a city council member is backed not only by my work experience, but also my academic studies. Having worked at a number of large investment banks and other financial institutions for more than a decade, my professional background in the financial industry has given me the analysis skills the city needs to understand the variety of financial matters that come before it and that ultimately determine its fate. Additionally, my 2 years of work experience within City Hall as the former director of grants office has given me an inside view of how the city's works, as well as exposure to city council processes, having regularly attended both city council meetings and subcommittee meetings where I presented matters and arguments before city council members in support of the grant contracts that came before my office. My city experience also allowed me to see firsthand ways that efficiencies can be increased and spending reduced, knowledge which is backed up by my process improvement training that I received while working in the financial industry. Additionally, with a bachelor's in economics from Princeton that is complemented by a master's in historical and sustainable architecture from NYU and a master's in urban regeneration from the University College London, I have the academic background that supports my candidacy as well. Thus, my dream for being part of making Bridgeport better is not one simply based on blind passion, but from experience working for the city and knowledge gained from studying how cities can regenerate themselves. Studies I pursued purposely because of my desire to come back to Bridgeport. I'm running for city council because I care about my hometown and in particular the future of the city for the young people who are growing up here today. Of my fellow panelists, I believe I'm the only one who attended public schools in Bridgeport and that works regularly with youth who are currently in these schools. I believe in the power of a quality education and its impact on how far one can advance in our society. I currently lead an organization that not only provides science education to local high school youth, but also provides opportunities for them to connect and give back to their city. I believe that serving on city council is just one of the ways that I can use my passion, experience, and education to move the city forward. I also believe that one of the best ways for positive change to happen is to have a seat at the decision-making table and not just one on the sidelines where voices are not always heard. To move the city forward, I believe that independent thinking and a willingness to put in the hours to really study the city's budget, its contracts, its ordinances, and all matters that make up the city and how it functions is what is needed to understand and address the issues the city faces with solutions that take into account the variety of its moving parts. I also believe the ability to work well with others and reach compromise is needed to bring about change. Being a city council member for me will not just be about listening to our constituents and the concerns and issues they have, but about taking actions needed to address their concerns and resolve their issues so that we can all feel like we are part of the city. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Pete Spain. Many thanks to John Soltis for hosting us and to all of you for coming tonight. I'm humbled and honored to be running with somebody as wonderful as Christina Smith, as you just heard, to represent you and our diverse district. There's serious work to be done at this critical time in City Hall and in our communities, especially in light of last year's 29% mill rate increase, the daily challenges facing many of our friends and neighbors, and our city's precarious finances. Those finances got worse last Friday when, through an executive order, the governor eliminated $8.5 million for our public schools that our city was depending on. And just last night, in the Connecticut Mirror, it was reported that the state's program that brought in $17 million to Bridgeport since 2015 from a share of sales tax revenues is being cut dramatically. Perhaps we'll hear tonight from Scott Burns, the co-chair of our Budget and Appropriations Committee, about the contingency plans that he has in mind. Any substantive discussion of Bridgeport's future must include financial sustainability, yours, mine, and our city's. We need an honest accounting. And with that must come qualified expertise and professional standards, which I believe Christina Smith and I offer. But ultimately, we are only as good as our word. If we can't get that right, little else matters. As the new co-chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee last year, Scott Burns approved a budget that locked in the 29% mill rate increase, the highest tax increase in the history of Bridgeport. When Scott ran in 2015, he promised in his literature that he would, quote, lead the fight to reduce property taxes and their impact. And then at a council candidate forum that October, much like this one, Scott said, quote, we don't want to drive people out because of obscene taxes. Scott also said then at the same event, quote, I'm at a point in my life where I feel like there are big important issues in the world, but as long as we're alive and healthy and all that, we can deal with them. Perhaps Scott will explain tonight to all the people here and throughout our community who've been devastated by the 29% mill rate increase, how they can deal with that big important issue in their world. And if he does, then maybe Scott can also explain this. In this Vote for Burns and Kane flyer, Scott claims the following. In the first 2 years, I've fought to address the unfair tax burden on local residents. The piece claims that Scott and Rowan will, quote, work to continue to reduce the city's reliance on residential property taxes. I don't know how these two will lead us out of the financial quicksand or begin to address Bridgeport's new stark fiscal reality due to the state cutbacks, much less our city's $1.7 billion in unfunded liabilities. An honest accounting is needed, and that will provide the essential foundation for a comprehensive economic development plan for the next 5 years. We must make smart investments in education, tourism, enterprise zones, public safety, streetscapes, and coastal resiliency. Investments that we must be able to both measure and analyze, because if we can't measure and analyze, then we can't manage. And if we can't know the price tag, then why are we putting taxpayers on the hook to pay for it? I'm deeply concerned. The record shows we won't get an honest accounting from Scott, who promises and doesn't deliver, and then campaigns on the broken promise as a positive effort. I'm concerned we can't get an honest accounting from Scott and Rowan, whose fundraiser last week featured Mario Testa, Joe Ganim, and the local Democratic Town Committee boss, Danny Roach. What kind of young, fresh ideas will emanate from this rogues gallery? Evidently, they're pleased with Scott Burns' performance and the newbie to Bridgeport, Rowan Kane, who paid his car taxes in June this year to the town of Guilford. Reportedly, he's lived in Bridgeport for 8 months. Couldn't the Democratic Town Committee find someone who has community roots? Someone who has demonstrated a love for Bridgeport for more than a few months? Is there no feeder system, no development track? What is the point of the DTC in our district? Just another layer of political dysfunction that does not serve the greater good? My fellow citizens of the 130th, we need real change on the city council now. We need real change together. And that comes from people who have proven themselves in the community with their qualifications, effective leadership, and integrity. And that's just what Senator Marilyn Moore said in her endorsement of me and Christina Smith. She said that we have, quote, the integrity and the leadership we need to make our community thrive. And we've got something else too, a willingness to listen, to work together, to communicate, and to turn the conversation into positive action. So let's make things happen on September 12th and beyond. Thank you.
Okay, who has the first letter? I'm gonna go first. Okay, and it will go to Victoria.
I have one question for each of you. What have you done for Black Rock?
Thanks for the question. Since 2013, I've been involved with a group that started out called Citizens Working for a Better Bridgeport, started by Phil Bladges and Dave Walker. And it's now called Better Bridgeport. I've been involved with that on and off for that time. And as someone who majored in English and then went on later to get a degree in epidemiology at Yale, I came late to the importance of data and analysis, but I do have that skill set. And I really appreciate learning from those two and also having a broad-based group that we would reach out to around the city to talk to about financial problems. And so I started to attend city council meetings and ask questions and get up and speak on behalf of, I think, BlackRock's concerns. And I've been working on that ever since.
I guess I will address both BlackRock and the West End district. So for BlackRock, I won't say that I've done so much. I was a board member for the Boroughs Community Center for some time, so I gave my time with that organization. In addition, I was an attendee for over a year for the PT Partners Initiative. That was led by FCCF and some other organizations, Collective Impact Initiative. So I think really with those two things, it's more been a listener to our community for some time, understanding things, but nothing very tactical, I would say. This is not to say I've not done some activities around the city, but nothing, ever so glorious that I would brag about.
Thanks. In the role as a council member, you get a lot of requests about fixing day-to-day things, whether it's potholes or if a person has an issue with a traffic situation, things like that. So there's a lot of little things I'm not even going to delve into on that. But one thing exactly with the BlackRock community, working with Phil Bladges and the safety committee is something we open lines of communication between the council and with the BlackRock neighborhoods with the police chief, captain and the chief. So we do a lot in terms of maintaining what is happening here in terms of how do we address quality of life, how do we address safety and things like that. Beyond that though, I think for our neighborhood, which we know we felt that tax increase, I have devoted a great deal of my time and energy to see what we can do to reduce the costs that are here in the city, as well as to find some new revenue streams. And that is going to be part of the answer in terms of how do we solve this burden that we feel as homeowners and by extension renters and the others who live in this neighborhood, that we're going to help solve this challenge that's before us. So, as I said, there's a lot of little things. I'm not going to delve into all of them, but that's the main focus of what I've been working on. And I think we have found some pathways forward to make things better in the city, and that is going to be what leads to a better BlackRock.
What about PT?
So just a couple quick corrections. I have lived here for much longer than 8 months. Maybe I met Pete 8 months ago, but I've lived here for 15 months. My car taxes were paid in Guilford last year because I moved in June, so it was at 14 months. And I don't think $33 on car taxes that I paid last year, because my car is now registered in Bridgeport, are the biggest problem that are facing us right now. I'm about to answer your question, so yeah, I mean I get 2 minutes to answer in whichever way I see fit. What have I done for BlackRock? BlackRock, first of all, I sell BlackRock to every young person that I come across. If they are looking for a place to live, I say come to BlackRock, move to BlackRock. You'll fall in love with it immediately. On a larger scale, I've worked with the Bridgeport Young Dems. This is on a citywide basis to create an alternative voice in the Democratic Party so that we don't have to rely on the DTC, so that we don't have to bring in, so that we don't have to have this stagnation and this opaque political process in the city. I am proud of that. I'm proud of that work, and that is the kind of work that I want to bring to city council.
Just one question, one correction. You're running to be a civil servant, and your duty, first of all, is to answer questions. Okay. You should answer the
Yeah,
questions.
so they can come for him and respond.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, my question is for Burns.
Thank you for everyone.
Everybody. Oh, mine's very specific. I'd like to hear more specifics instead of generalities. You mentioned here all sorts of things that were done for the city of Bridgeport, but nothing in specific like you mentioned transparency. And this goes for everybody as well. What specific things can be done to bring more transparency to the budget? Who works for who consults for who works on a city budget, might get paid by the city, might work for a private company. Just the sort of things that we need to know. More transparency.
Okay, if I understand the question, it's a question about transparency. So,
What is going on?
okay, well, actually, really quickly, just because I have a tendency to do things and not remember what I've done, and to go back to the other question, I would just say during my time at the city, my office did apply for grant funding that helped with the lighthouse that we won, and as well as building a Kaboom playground over by Shell Street for PT Partners. I don't attribute that to myself. What I was doing when I was working. In terms of transparency, and I will speak to transparency in terms of my ideas or thoughts as to what I saw when I was working with the city and how there could be more efficiencies and cost reductions. These are not going to be big things, but for example, when I was working at the city, one of the very first things I started there in the fall, and when my admin talked about the budget and how we come up with a new budget and spend down our budget funding, I was told basically that, oh, whenever we have funding left, we just transfer it to office supplies and buy up office supplies, such that we had a closet full of office supplies that we never used. I bring that up because when I worked at UBS, for example, a billion-dollar organization, whenever you were buying office supplies, you had one office that you go to, and there was no just let's spend money on office supplies at the end of the year. I'll give another example. When we had to renew our contract for our copier machine, I thought it odd that, for example, there wasn't a volume thing that the city did to save funding. So when I to answer the question about transparency, I think it would be for me is having a real understanding of what the budget is, what makes up the budget, and providing clear information to people as to where we're spending our money and how things could be made more efficient.
Thank you. When I came into the office here and then city council, it became apparent to me how much needs to be really brought to light in terms of where we are in terms of the city finances. I don't know how much time many of you have spent on the city webpage. It is badly outdated, and that's something I pushed through our communications office to update, and I keep hearing it's getting done, but it's not. But that is the place where we need to improve what we're doing in terms of transparency. And I've pushed our finance director and our RPM director to say, look, this is what other cities are doing. I mean, if you look at Stanford's webpage, or even New Haven and other cities around here, we can see, for example, who's been hired, what positions have been filled recently. One of the things I really want to push with the finance department is, where are our capital fundings going? Where have they been spent? Where have they not been spent? And quite frankly, the previous administration did not do a good job, shall we say, in terms of keeping things open and apparent and accessible. And part of the new administration has been working to improve that. And I've been pushing to say, we need to know about this, that, and different expenditures on school programs and capital improvements in the city. And that's something I want to see go forward. And it's something I've been working on in the last few months. that I would love to see going forward on my return to city council. Because I think that's the thing that really matters. The other point I want to say is that, we have open meetings for budget meetings. We hold about 15 every spring. And quite frankly, not too many folks show up, but they're there. And one of the things I pushed this year, I went directly to departments and I said, who works for you? Who has not worked for you? Who's left positions? What kind of grant money are you using? And through that was a much better process in terms of getting what was going on. So I think that's where we're moving in transparency.
Yeah, a couple of quick things. I agree with Scott on all those fronts. I think monthly budget reports from the finance director are a must. I think a really important thing that kind of gets, you might not see the connection directly, but it's an increase in volunteerism. Yeah. So making sure that our boards and commissions are filled and making sure that they're meeting regularly and that people are attending those meetings and people know when those meetings are. There was a planning and zoning commission, planning and zoning meeting canceled because of lack of a quorum, I think last week or the week before. And it was a really important meeting. It was a really important meeting because they were going to talk about the LDA of the Majestic Theater there, and they didn't have a quorum. We need to attract talented, educated folks who can serve on these boards and commissions and who can relate what's going on to their communities. I think on the back end of it as well, just from a city councilor point of view, being communicative with your city councilors. Scott is not good on Facebook. He knows he's not good on Facebook. I'm a little better on Facebook. If I'm elected to city council, you will be so annoyed by the amount of emails I'll send you and the amount of communication you'll have from me because I want to hear from you and I want you guys to know what's going on. I want you to be at these meetings because when you're at these meetings, you're giving your city councilors a stronger voice.
Great question. Transparency is something we lack. I think we have an allergy to it in our government. What you should do, I think, is make sure that monthly financial report is not only available to everyone city council, but it should be posted online electronically and be searchable. That's the key piece, right? Right, okay, that's what you meant, that's good. And then we have something called Open Budget, which is a really good software platform. And other great cities in the country use it too, like Providence. But it really has to do with what you put into it that matters, right? So we have Open Budget. But when I go in there and I look at the number of cost centers we have in Bridgeport, we have 400 plus cost centers. By comparison, Providence has 20. So it's transparent, but it's inscrutable. So what's the difference? The next thing is we need a quarterly report from our city council people telling us what's going on in the city council, what's happened, what's coming up, what matters to me. I'm a taxpayer. What are you doing for me? And then we also need a quarterly meeting. And we need to do them all over this district. We need to have them up at Bryant's School on Poplar. We need to have them at the Aquaculture School. We need to have them at PT. So that we are in front of you and you're going to tell us what's on your mind and we better be doing it or you're going to hold us accountable. And finally, I would also say that committee meetings are great if people can get to them in their busy schedule, but it would be good if at committee meetings, the chairs of the meetings would recognize people who can contribute from the community, like John Marshall Lee. That would be great, because that would be valuable to all of us in the city. Now, New York City, by comparison, has over $1 trillion taxable grant list. We have just between 5.5 and 6 billion. They have an org chart for their finance department, and I could actually look at it, and I can call people on it and get answers if I want it. So we should try to, go towards that achievement. Thank you.
Maybe sound like a colloquial question, but it's not. That's for implications. The library, as you know, is independent. We had a lot of retirements last year, and we were desperately understaffed. Yet, even though we have our own budget, in order for us to hire people, there has to be 7 or 8 signatures, the last one being the mayor. We have a number of applicants who are qualified, but we can't hire them because the mayor has, for whatever reason, refused to sign the request. I'd like to know from you is A, what you as city council members can do about that, and B, what should be the legal relationship between the city and the library. There's absolutely nothing in the charter which gives the mayor the right to do what he is doing, and mayors before him don't. And it's hurting the library, and if it's hurting the library, it's hurting all of you.
Thanks for that question. I am keenly aware of the struggles that the library has gone through the past 6 months or so. And I am keenly aware that the mayor has not signed off on certain positions. And I was consulted by members of the library board, and I met with them and discussed what their challenges were. And I went right to the mayor's office, the chief administrative officer, and said, "Look, this is not your money to the city side. This is library money. I understand that. You understand that, obviously." And for whatever reason, the mayor seemed to think that this was all the bottom line. We're going to try to, save some money here by not hiring a librarian and put that library hours at risk. So I went to bat for the library and said, "Hey, mayor, get these signed. It's not your money. It's money that's already encumbered elsewhere. Move on with it." The other piece I want to add is during the budget hearings, it came to light that essentially the budget for the library is being shortchanged. So, one of the things I feel very proud of and very strong about is the fact that I've been able to create good relationships with other council members, with members of the administration, and that pays off. So when I said, "Hey, I've got an appeal from the library. Can you move some money over to the library from one fund to another?" It's not, it's not a bottom dollar. We're cutting anybody's taxes or anybody's taxes. It's just money moving in a certain direction. So we were able to move some money over to the library so that it could hire one more person. Now that may not seem like a lot, but you know what? It's an effort, and I feel good that I made an effort to be a friend of the library and move that fund.
Yeah, so I'm reading a book from the library currently, so I am absolutely a friend of the library. I think this is an opportunity to actually look at how we react to these kind of problems. Rather than just being reactive, let's try and be a little proactive, and look. So the library is a separate entity, right? Let's try. As city councilor, I would absolutely push the mayor to keep his hands off whatever processes the library is working on. But I work with the library to reach out to private institutions to see if there's some funding we can get from outside the city government. There's an opportunity there to create these partnerships to lessen the amount of money the library gets from the city, and B, make these libraries let these libraries live up to their full potential. This is a great facility. The North End Library is a great facility. I would love to see a library on the East End as well. So I think the libraries in particular are a chance to really be proactive rather than reactive, in particular on the budgetary line.
Dr. Greenberg, quick question. The process, what requires that the mayor's charter that requires the mayor to sign that?
Nothing in the charter that
You said that, right?
It's just what the city has done for years and simply taken over doing it. And since we can't get paid unless the mayor signs
Right.
it, we
Okay.
have to wait for his or her signature.
Okay, great. Well, my guess is it will have to go to court based on my experience with looking at this administration. However, it would be nice to make every effort to bring every leader in the community together to point this out, that this is a key, simple step that we need to do the least we can do for one of the most important institutions, the library. I would also ask our state legislative delegation to lean on the mayor a bit, since we are the ward of the state financially, and we really need the state. So if we're getting the state delegation behind us, we're getting the city council, you build pressure as much as you can, and I'm sure you've been trying to do that with Jim O'Donnell.
Again, if I understand the question, one, it was about improving the hiring process and improving the legal relationship between the city and the library. For the first, improving the hiring process, again, I come from a background of process improvement. I worked for the city and had to go through the process of attempting to hire someone, a process that took several months, involved several sheets of paper that I did not understand because they were just not clear. I'm used to this not only from the city, but having worked other places where I question the process and often am told no one's ever asked the question. So I think, again, I'm not going to say that I can solve the problem, but it's about asking the questions, understanding what the processes are, and figuring where things don't need to happen and where things could be better improved. Again, with the legal relationship between the city and library, I have read our charter. There are a number of things in our charter, first of all, that point to sections that don't exist, and rules that are there that we actually don't follow. I think it's first about bringing what those issues are to light, and then trying to figure out a way to come up with those solutions in conjunction with talking to other city council members and other people.
Thank you. I want to kind of cut to the chase here. We're kind of beating around the bushes here. Bridgeport has a lot of bushes. I want to address the level of corruption and insider trading that goes on in this city, and how it is supported by the people who are in the pocket of Joe Ganim, the people who endorse candidates because those candidates are known to be in the pocket of Joe Ganim. How do you square your position? How do you square your positions here as running for city council, and how do you propose to represent the people of Black Rock independently of all of those insider traders? 23 years I've been living in Black Rock and paying taxes. I have a stake. What is the stake of each and every candidate sitting here?
So the question is
Independence.
independence. Okay, independence. Question mark. Okay, so I mean, I'm a proud Democrat. Right, I am proud to have the Democratic endorsement in this. Proud to be the Democratic endorsed candidate. My first vote I ever cast was for Barack Obama in 2008 primary. There was no doubt that he was not the establishment candidate. He was not the choice of the party. Here in Bridgeport, I am vice president of the Greater Bridgeport Young Democrats, which was created as an alternative voice for young activists and young Democrats in this city because the establishment, because the DTC, because the Democratic Party in this town was so opaque and was so difficult to work with in a lot of ways. I am very proud of that work that we have accomplished over the past 18 months as Young Dems. We have 4 candidates running for city council right now. This is a youth movement in this city that is, I think, very powerful. 4 Young Dems running for city council and 1 for Board of Ed. I'm proud of that independence. I'm proud of that alternative voice, and I will absolutely be an independent voice on the city council.
Christina and I collected over 300 signatures from proud Democrats in our district in less than a week. We needed 202 in 2 weeks. That's how we got on the ballot. I think that's the independence we need. In the years I've been here, I've spent, I would estimate, over 200 hours canvassing for non-DTC endorsed candidates to the Board of Ed, for the City Council, and for State Senate. And I'm proud of that. And we have a great state senator in Maryland Moore. I'm very proud of it. And I'm glad that I stood back and tried to get a reading of the landscape before I invested myself. Because it's a tricky business here in Bridgeport. You don't know who to trust. But if you work hard, you have some humility, and you talk to people who know more than you can realize the coalitions you need to build and the people you can work with. which it turns out is about 99% of us. And that's the question, is why do we continue to allow a few people to work the system for themselves at the cost of all of us? Thank you.
I mean, my independence, I would say, comes from the fact that, I mean, I'm not a loner necessarily. I'm a very friendly person and make lots of friends. But, you know, I do kind of fly my own kite, or, you know, I am my own person. I've never been a follower. I never gave in to the peer pressure when I was a kid. And I still made friends and had that independence without having to worry about such things. And I maintained that same attitude when I was working for the city, specifically to the point of corruption, which I think often happens, honestly, because no one's reading the papers and no one's reading the budget. You know, it was brought up to me recently that there was a line item of, you know, $2 million made out to a holding company. Doesn't seem to make any sense, somewhat related to the housing authority perhaps. Very unclear, but the thing is, I think for the most part, people are not paying attention to the numbers and issues that are coming before them. In particular in the budget, in particular in the spending, and I think I would have the independence to be the person that actually reads these things and brings them to light. And again, as I said before, is to ask the questions and to get the answers to understand what is happening.
I'm proud to say that I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I've been a Democrat in several municipalities here in the state of Connecticut where I've lived. And when I moved to Bridgeport and decided to get involved politically, I really didn't care who the PTC chair was. He apparently was okay with me being chosen. I don't know. I've had like maybe 2 conversations with the man. So, you know, I'm here to be an independent voice because Bridgeport, Black Rock is a very independent place. And, you know, we get a lot of opinions coming in, and so I don't feel beholden to anybody. You know, I've never been asked to vote a certain way or coerced in a certain way. I've been, you know, certainly presented arguments because the administration would want to do X, Y, or Z. I get that. But, you know, I'm here to act on behalf as best as possible for people of Black Rock. In terms of, you know, the corruption and whatnot, certainly we have a history and tradition. And that's one of the things that sort of is a tarnish on the city that we have to fight to overcome. But I'm an independent person. I own my own home here with my wife. We plan to be here for a long time. I want Bridgeport to get better. And it's going to get better by being more open, more honest, more forthright. And I will speak for my partner here, Ron, is the exact kind of person that we want to come into the city, to embrace the city, become involved in the city, and inject some new life into the Democratic Party, into the political process here. So, you know, I get the idea that there's a tradition of corruption here, and quite frankly has an effect of scaring off investors perhaps. But, you know, this is we're at a bit of a turning point, and I'm looking forward to making this city more vibrant and more diverse in its leadership.
So my question so in general Black Rock, we pride ourselves as being the hub of in Bridgeport. And so what what we do to not only recruit but retain young people in Bridgeport, because quite frankly, living in Stanford, this is a question I asked again in 2018, and didn't get an answer, but this is my district. I don't know anything how to try to help in school. So, in the bowels of the internet in the last week, us renters have been told that we should not have pools in Black Rock.
Question, please.
So, my question is, what will the 4 candidates do to not only recruit but retain millennials and millennials?
So Constance, I rented more in my life than I've owned, so I don't have anything against renters. Okay. So retaining millennials, your question was great to Joe Ganem, and of course he didn't answer it honestly. I'll try to. Millennials need to have a place that's attractive to live because, as Mike Bloomberg said, where people want to live, companies will come. Okay, I really believe that. I think he's right. We need to also have a system where people can come in and have kids and they don't have to leave, feel like they have to move out of town at a certain point because of the schools. So we need to have an ongoing discussion and an ongoing measurement of what the benchmarks are that matter to millennials. And I'm not a millennial, so I don't know that. But I'd be interested in listening to millennials and hearing about that from them.
Well, so I know for many I look like a millennial, but I'm actually 40, even though my mom's told me never to admit after 29. But many of my friends are millennials, and many of the friends that I've made since moving back to Bridgeport have actually since left Bridgeport. I probably could name 10 or 15 of those people, all under 30 years old or just slightly over. And I think a lot of that is, and this is again having lived in New York City and in London and other big cities, is that there is a lack of connection among the millennials. A lot of them are teachers who have come here, but we're all, especially if we're single, which I am as well, looking for things to do, to hang out, to connect with others. These are the things that you want to do. And one thing that I would have liked to have done since this time already, or to do in the future, is to find ways to bring millennials together in other social activities. And I know there are things like Thrive, which I think is run by the BRBC, but having something that more regularly brings people together, is the simple thing for me. Again, I've had a number of friends leave. A lot of it is because when you're in a place like this, and if you are single, they're like, well, okay, I'm not meeting anyone, and so they leave. Having events at the local restaurants, or encouraging more restaurants to come, or encouraging millennials to start their own businesses, like the Williamsburgs did, where it was a lot of the young people who started up these coffee shops and things of that nature. Basically, in short, is trying to find more ways to engage millennials in social activities such that they feel that they are part of the community and can enjoy themselves, whether they're single or not.
So I'm the father of a millennial, so I'm seeing my young daughter looking to her future about where she wants to be, and she is, like many of them, wants to be in an urban setting. And I think BlackRock and Bridgeport as a whole can become this sort of center of where millennials want to move to. But there's certain needs that are there. They need transportation, okay? A lot of millennials do not want to have a car, don't own a car. They want public transportation that's accessible, affordable, and where they can be put into quick use. They also want housing. They need decent housing. And today I had the opportunity to go visit the Four Stone building down by McLeavy Green, and they're about to open up some new apartments down there that are absolutely beautiful. They're a 5-minute walk to the train station. They've got restaurants right in the area. They'll find employment or go down to UB for education. This is the kind of thing that Bridgeport needs, and we're actually doing. I just feel so often that there's a negativity about, nothing's happening in Bridgeport, it's not growing, it's not doing this, that, the other. I think that's the exact opposite. And I think that's a reason why individuals like Rowan and Constance are coming to the city, because we have this opportunity. They want entertainment, okay? And we do have, a restaurant and bar situation along Fairfield Ave that is entertaining, it's engaging. And I think those are the things that we need to do to make possible in Bridgeport. And so, whether it's simple things like permitting and zoning and making the process for a business owner to open up his facility more quickly than otherwise, those are the things that we're going to do to attract millennials to Bridgeport, and I think that's going to do an awful lot to further the future and give us a whole lot of hope and excitement. Thank you.
I feel an enormous amount of pressure for this question. So every answer up here has been, from a millennial's perspective, sound. It really does come down to economic development, it comes down to, what it really comes down to is jobs. We need jobs, and right now the jobs are in cities. But there's no reason that jobs can't come to Bridgeport. We are already seeing a growth of residents, or millennial-friendly residences in Bridgeport, but we need the jobs to be here as well, for folks to be truly attracted to living here. And you guys are right that we need restaurants and we need entertainment, we need all that kind of stuff. But people aren't going to move here if there aren't jobs around here.
Could the four of you please speak for a few minutes and give concrete examples of how you will improve and strengthen public schools in this area?
So I don't know if I can give concrete examples of how I would improve the public schools. Again, I always start at the process of trying to understand what the issues are first and then making a decision after that. So, for example, I know that, there's a lot of debate about the schools needing more money, and I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, it's not just about throwing money at the schools, because you can compare the amount of money that Bridgeport is spending on its schools against other cities, and we're spending more, but our schools are still doing worse. I was looking at data between Hartford and Bridgeport recently, and Hartford spends about $19,000 per pupil, and I think Bridgeport spends $13,000. However, in looking at some of the test scores, Bridgeport is actually doing better than Hartford, so it's definitely not just about money. So again, I can't give concrete examples as much as say that I would do my best to understand how we are currently spending our money and benchmark that against other cities and understand some of the other issues that may be occurring. And again, and because education is important to me, I've done lots of reading on it. And not so long ago, the Bill Gates Foundation, so since 1999, they've spent $3 billion on innovations for public schools. And in the letter, they admit that they don't know what to do to make schools better. There was research done that said, okay, small schools are better. They saw that small schools were performing well, so they invested in small schools. But they didn't pay attention to that the bottom schools were also small schools. They ignored that data. So again, for me, it would be about really trying to understand where our issues are and addressing them that way.
Okay, I think a lot of you know that my background is as a teacher. I was in public schools for over 15 years, and then I continued to function as a coach in public schools. Here in Bridgeport, we know we went through a very tough budget last year, and the education budget had to be cut. And so this year, one of our main priorities as a budget committee was to redirect money into the budget of the BOE so that they could rehire kindergarten parents. Because what we heard from principals, teachers, parents, everybody, that one concrete step that could be done to improve the situation in Bridgeport would be to restore the kindergarten parents. Now, we know the state budget's in flux, to say the least, and we don't know what the final dollars will look like. And I know, you can't take dollar for dollar what the governor said in terms of what he's looking to do. But one of the things we absolutely have to stand up for is we need better funding from the state level for Bridgeport schools. Okay, the monies for the Bridgeport schools are not going to come from Bridgeport. Okay, you're taxed enough, I'm taxed enough. It needs to come from a different source. We have old, outdated modes of funding in this state, from a regressive property tax to sales taxes, all the other means that we're under stress as taxpayers. But we need to change these formulas so that Bridgeport kids have a fair shot. Because you know what? I work with kids at Black Rock School and at Bryant School as a volunteer, and I see what these kids are doing. They're just kids, and they want to be great kids, and they want to develop themselves. But we need to make sure we have the proper funding and fight for them at the state level, at the local level, to make sure they have everything they need. So there's more to that, but absolutely, education is a huge priority for me. And without strong schools, you're not going to have strong communities. It's a little bit of the chicken and egg, but that's the reality.
Yeah, so there's Scott's absolutely right. The real problem is at the state level, and the fact that we have 169 different municipalities and 130 something different school districts across the state. The funding is not even, and that is something I would work with my friends in the state legislature to try and reform. That's at the 10,000 foot level. On the ground level, Greg, thank you for the question. I think it's really about increasing, just getting kids the basic stuff that they need on a day-to-day basis. The foods in Bridgeport public schools, lunches, if kids get breakfast, 9 times out of 10, they're completely unacceptable. My dad is a public school teacher down in Norwalk, and his goal always was to get kids to college no matter what. But it's about more than that. It's about making sure these kids are able to learn comfortably and just thrive in their environments, because they're not able to do that right now.
What we should do is look around the room here. We have a dean of the Graduate School of Education at Fairfield. We have some retired teachers. We have parents. And we should think about an advisory group that would help us learn about what's happening in education, because we're not experts. We all love education. We're the product of good educations, I hope. And we think everyone deserves one. But we really need people who understand what's happening in Bridgeport, understand the educational profession, and how we are treating it and honoring it in this school system, and the families that are involved as well. My understanding is that the earlier we get the child reading, the better the outcomes through K through 12. So I would look at all the reading programs we're doing in kindergarten and first grade, and seeing if every child's getting the same great opportunity on reading. That would be one concrete thing I'd do, and the advisory groups. And then I would also try to have more communication between the Board of Education and the City Council, so that it's not the kind of thing where the Board of Ed comes over with a budget that ends up being tens of millions of dollars different than what the City Council approves. We should be closer to that. It shouldn't be a kind of a face-off on the budget end. We should feel there's an appreciation and a harmony in how we're trying to deal with our very small shrinking pie. Thank you.
Totally guys on the end, you are out of your league with that. First of all, yes, you can't throw money just at, it's not the problem, it's not just money, obviously. But the fact of the matter is that you have to have good leadership in the building. And you want to answer, like they said, talk to the parents, talk to people that are involved in education, that are on the front lines every single day dealing with that. Don't just skip, again, hold on. I want to make a statement, then I'll make a question. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, you definitely need to know more about education and how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? How are you going to get educated? So, excuse me, I'm asking it. How are you going to educate yourself to educate, help educate our children? Because how dare they say they're not even going to reach the MBR? Minimum budget requirement, if you don't know what that means. This is your city. You educate your children. Yeah, that was it. They said
I agree that we need better cooperation between the Board of Ed and the council, and I think, quite frankly, our current Board of Ed president and I have been able to have some good, frank conversations about what's going on. But at the same time, I have friends who teach around the state, and they sometimes say, "What's up with the Board of Ed?" And I think that speaks to the fact that Bridgeport needs stability at every level. We need good, strong leadership on the Board of Ed. And I want to respect the Board of Ed in terms of what they do, in terms of their role, both as elected officials and administrators. That's their domain, that's their bailiwick. And I want to make sure that they do a great job. I do want to stand up for them, as I said, in terms of getting them better funding through the state and what we can do from the city side. But quite frankly, as a teacher, I have a pretty good understanding of where budgets come from on the education side. And I think one of the criticisms I hear from my fellow counselors, and this is why a lot of them are, quite frankly, anti-education, is they say, oh, money gets wasted, the salaries are bloated, people are overpaid for different roles. And it's very difficult for me to say, well, yeah, we just hired a superintendent, that's great, that's excellent. Glad to have her on board. And they say, oh, she's paid too much. And I say, well, stop and look at our peer communities around here and around the country. She's really not overpaid compared to what we're trying to hire. I mean, we could hire someone who's underqualified and pay them, peanuts. But what's the reward on that? So I want to see that our schools are, staffed with excellent people who are paid a fair wage and do the best to provide stability for our kids in this community. Because as I said, this is where we're going to develop a strong community through strong schools.
Yeah, so just to answer your direct question, how to better educate myself on the issues. Yeah, I would go to the PAC meetings. I would meet with all the principals around the district. It's about talking with folks. It's about hearing what their issues are and hearing how they think we can improve the schools around here. I think it's as simple as better communication. I think the advisory board is a pretty decent idea, but I think we can also have better folks on the Board of Education as well.
I was lucky. I grew up with a family of two parents who were educated, and I had a lot of stability. So when I go to Board of Ed meetings and when I've talked to people canvassing over 500 doors, I realize there's a lot of things I brought that were assumptions and part of white privilege that do not, really work on the ground here. So it's really about getting out and putting yourself out there and learning and listening. But I do say, when I worked at the Lighthouse program as a volunteer, that we need to do better just in terms of the optics. You go in and it's essentially the warehousing of children. There's really no education going on. So I think if we can just think about raising the standards in terms of what most educated people would think, hey, this is what the least we should give, and then go in and measure what we're doing, see if anything's improving, and talk to experts and parents, because parents have the most important job in the world, raising children. And I'm not a parent, but I believe that.
Again, educating myself on how to better educate, have better education in the city. Again, I do believe in the fact that we do likely need more funding. But again, beyond that, having volunteered with junior achievement at BASIC and trying to teach a class entrepreneurialism and not having any engagement from the kids. They were all on their cell phones and doing other things. Or from having spoken to an administrator at a local charter school. I was participating in a leadership program with this person, and we were just talking about things in general, and saw a sign on the door of the school emphasizing absenteeism and how often kids aren't showing to school. And I asked her about that, and she's like, we struggle with getting the parents to bring their kids to school. And obviously, again, even if we want to improve the schools, if there are family issues that are occurring such that the kid is not even showing up to school, we can't expect that kid to then perform well on a test. So I think it's just so multifaceted in terms of what the issues are in our schools. I have a nephew who is 22, lives in Bridgeport, has not graduated from high school. His mom went to Central, she graduated, but she could barely read, right? She graduated, she was pushed through, and to expect that then she's now trying to educate her son through this schooling system. There's just so much in terms of whether support for parents who sometimes don't know any better. You don't know what you don't know. Support for the teachers who are dealing with a different demographic of kids because of the poverty they're growing up with. There are many things I would do to educate myself in terms of talking to teachers, talking to parents, and just understanding the situation. And from my own experience of a mom that was always working, of the challenges that go into raising a child and providing good education.
With the indulgence of the candidates, it's almost 10 to 9. Could we do what I'll call the lightning round? One short question, 1 minute answer. Is that okay with everybody? That will do the closing statement. New York Yankees.
Thank you, Mr. Sophie. My question would be very quickly. I grew up in the Bronx, and what saddens me is that the present and the previous city councilors have failed P.T. Barnum. And I would like to know, what is it that you guys are going to do any different in this new election than what you have not done before? This is Burns. Good question. Because everybody. What are you going to do for the P.T. Barnum family? So I understand that you had about 6-7 streets that they're going to pave. You had a list.
Okay.
Or nothing for P.T. Barnum.
Okay, this is one question.
Sorry.
Postpone the lightning.
So I would be meeting with the folks there immediately. I would hear what the largest issues are there. Scott has been working with PT Partners since he was elected and has been a voice for them there. There's a lot to be done over there, and I think it comes back to being on the ground, listening to folks, and being their advocate. Whether it's paving the roads over there, whether it's making sure that they're just making sure that they're being heard as much as the other folks in this district.
Well, they're not being heard. I know that because I've spent a lot of time at PT this year and in previous elections and talking to people, and even in non-election times where we went over to Crooks Center with Better Bridgeport and had a very good discussion. People need screens on their windows. They need fire alarms. They need a place to know where they can get their child some food. These are very basic needs, and they're very widespread there. But these people also have aspirations beyond their needs. And I currently have been helping drive someone there, a 36-year-old mom whose 12-year-old son is a truly gifted and outstanding kid. And my hope is he gets what he needs to go out and flourish in the world and come back to Bridgeport. That's what we need. We need to cultivate the most important resources, the children of Bridgeport. And I know that sounds like a political campaign, but prove me wrong. Tell me why that's not true. Okay? So what you need to do is think about simple solutions. We all want to do better. So what about if we have the BlackRock Uber retirement society where you all do a little driving for people who don't have a car at PT? What about if you give an hour a week to help a kid who goes to Wakeman and needs to have a little more homework after Wakeman because it's great to go get some exercise after school instead of sitting them down and making them do homework that they're completely bored by. So just creative, out-of-the-box thinking where you put yourself out there and you say, hey, this is important because if PT is failing, then Bridgeport's never going to get where it needs to go.
I will just add, again, having attended many PT Partners meetings and having been canvassing there a lot in the last couple of weeks, several weeks, I think one of the biggest issues for me is that you have a whole demographic of people who have generally just been ignored. So yes, you listen to them and you hear them and you know, oh, that's so sad and that's very sad, and then you leave and you go back home and you deal with your own issues. And the thing is, and I understand, like we spoke to one person, she's like, you know, I'm not voting, I'm not going to participate because every time someone comes here, they promise they're going to do X, Y, and Z. I vote them in, and then nothing happens. And there's no way I was going to try to convince that person otherwise, because I see that and I think it's a shame as well. One of the biggest things that I have issue with in canvassing, to be honest, is that I hear the issues that people are having, issues that I've, you know, seen in my own family, seen in, you know, my own life. And when you can't do the basic things for people, when they're asking you to just change the smoke alarm and literally a year has gone by and you can't get that smoke alarm changed, that's a problem. And then you can't get that demographic to buy into anything else. So for me, the first thing is to really listen to those people and really try to be personal advocates for those people, right? It's a lot of the times that you don't have the time. My mom used to work until midnight at the A&P on Boston Avenue. A lot of you just don't have the time. But if we have the time, an hour here or an hour there, and we can give our support in some way, whether, you know, it's a very fragmented society, but like if we can get together and do something along those lines, it's about helping your fellow man and addressing these small things, and it makes a huge difference in these people's lives. I mean, I've had someone once help me simply, like, you know, take something to the store when I didn't have, I literally almost started crying because I was like, oh my God, I don't have to do something by myself.
Thank you.
George, thank you for that question. Because as council member of 130th District, I look at PT as a very important part of this district. And I have engaged myself with PT partners over there, and I've worked with Kate Kelly and Lee Mabry over in that neighborhood. And I have done an awful lot to be present and to hear the complaints of the citizens there and try to work on what they're working with, which is community organizing. And that is community that has lost trust in structural institutions, and so they are trying to get themselves in a position where they can function as anybody else. And I've gotten to know some of the residents there, and I'm very proud of my work over there. Okay, just one other piece. There's the Energia digester plant. That is a project that is coming to the parcel right next to the waste treatment plant. And that's something that, you know, maybe that gets lost in the shuffle, but I know that's on the books, and I'm going to keep working for that. And that's going to help not just the residents, because there's going to be some changes in how the waste treatment plant operates, but it's going to have an environmental impact because we're not going to be carting waste from the waste treatment plants all the way up to the pavement and whatnot. It's a quality improvement in that neighborhood. So that's something that, you know, I really feel very proud of. And I've also, you know, working with the police, they just opened a substation there, and I'm very glad to see that they now have a substation there. And that's the kind of thing that people deserve. Okay, they deserve some public comment, public presence of police. And lastly, the lives for a lot of the folks at PT are very difficult. And for somebody to say, oh, why don't we pick up the kid and drive them to the lighthouse over at Wakeman? That's a nice idea, but having conversed with a lot of these residents and moms, they can't even afford lighthouse. Okay? So to just say, I want to do that, that's a nice idea, but you need to know what's really happening on the ground.
Okay. 1-minute questions.
Yeah, so we've talked all night sort of about growing the tax revenue base of Bridgeport to try and lighten our taxes as homeowners, correct, right? What are some of the ideas the panel here has about bringing the business to Bridgeport and working with our delegates in Harvard, similar to UBS and Stanford? Why couldn't that come to Bridgeport? What are some ideas you could bring to the table to attract those high-end businesses to bring those millennials in for high-paying jobs, ideally to stay in the city?
Okay. 60 seconds for the ideas.
Great. I would do a history trolley that starts at Steel Point and then goes to the Barnum Museum and then goes to the Freeman Houses and also deals with other historic sections of Bridgeport. That budget would be about $500,000, and I would guess it could bring in up to $4 to $5 million. That's one quick thing I could tell you. I called up a developer who's the one who's running all the development south of 95 in Stamford and also in New York, and I asked him, what would make you dip your toe into Bridgeport? And he said, get rid of the political corruption and show me a place that people want to go and stay. That's what he told me. So but that's not a concrete plan for you, but I think if you get an honest foundation of our finances, then you can build up from there.
I can't speak to, say, for example, a UBS and bringing a larger company, but one idea I've had in the past, and a proposal I actually have, was to launch a business plan competition, like small business plan competition, similar to the one that the New York City Business Library does. There are studies that show that small businesses bring more to cities in terms of like revenue, jobs, etc. We have tons of empty storefronts around the city. If we could create an inventory of those systems, of those spaces, work with developers to understand, what they're looking to see from them, do an asset map of like, what are we missing? Do we have enough like Thai restaurants? Do we have enough Indian restaurants? Do we have enough, corner stores or other things? But really launch a business plan competition, in these various categories to get people interested into the city.
We have an Office of Economic Development, and in my experiences with it, they are essentially strained. And I would like to see more investment through our economic development so that when an investor wants to come and move a business or develop something around the city, they're making it smooth, that it's easy. For the small business owner, it can be difficult.
I absolutely agree. The Office of Economic Development is underfunded. I would work with the companies that are already here, Sikorsky, People's Bank, to see what brought them here. I would work to create a small business association through the chamber, through BRBC. In different neighborhoods, so it's not just the BRBC as a large entity, but a BlackRock Small Business Council and East and North End Business Council, because those are the organic growth is going to come from that. And on top of that, we need Class A office space downtown. We don't have enough. Folks are trying to come in, but there's no really solid office space downtown. I'd also talk to folks like Banana Land and the folks at Beehive, who are the millennial folks who will create the next round of jobs.
Okay, NYC, back there. Yeah, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I listened to what you were saying. I'm from New York, and you're probably not exactly unique. New York has more, but they do it better. All right, you were talking about bringing in businesses. Okay, I worked on Wall Street for 46 years. I was an assistant district attorney in New York County. I know, okay? And what I've heard, Pete, right? He alluded to it, and the young lady here alluded to it, but the rest of you are not doing it. And if you want businesses to come in here, Bridgeport has the highest property taxes, okay, in this state and probably the whole damn country.
Sir,
okay, if you want people, if you want businesses to come in, and you want them to invest, it's not necessarily you have to do it, but if you give them the proper package to come in, and they take a chance, and they make money, everybody's a winner.
Okay, so what is the question, sir?
The question is, no, they're not talking about cutting property taxes.
So the question is, how to cut.
Yeah, how you going to do that?
Okay, Christina, 1 minute.
Again, in order to cut property taxes, we either have to reduce spending or increase revenues. Again, I really do believe in small business and that there would be plenty of room for it within the city. I think having something like a small business express, something that helps small businesses. I've registered a business in the city before. It is not exactly the clearest process. Most businesses fail. I read the book E-Myth. Most businesses fail because people don't know how to manage the basic operations of them. In that book, it talked about a woman, she really knew how to make pies and thought, okay, I'm going to start my own pie business. Knew nothing about how to manage a business. I think providing that support to small businesses, and again, having this competition or otherwise providing those services that make it easier for them to navigate our system would work.
I think the question ultimately was how are we going to reduce property taxes? And as I said, one example we've done is to refinance some of our long-term debt and some of our long-term pensions, and that could yield us savings this year alone of $5 million. That's the first step. And secondly, we need to be a city that welcomes business, that wants to work with business, and I don't care who the mayor is. You know, if a mayor or whoever's in the economic development office, we need to open the doors and say, yeah, come on in, let's work with you. One of the steps we're working on is creating a structured table of tax incentives. When a developer wants to come to the city of Bridgeport, it's not going to be a one-off, you know, let's make a deal with behind somebody's back. It's going to be right here on the table. This is what you're looking to do, this is what we're looking to offer. Can we do business?
Yeah, the only way that, I mean, we can nickel and dime here about cutting and increasing revenue here. The only real solution to solving the property taxes in this city is economic growth. It's growing the grand list. It's growing the tax base. That's what needs to happen, and it needs to come from both organically the folks that are already here, and recruiting new businesses from outside. Look, Sikorsky's going to going to be building helicopters there for the next 20 years. We need to work with them and others who are already here to lost train of thought there. Sorry. To bring in the folks to give the jobs, to create the jobs that are not here yet, and to be.
Hi, I'm not sure that the money we're going to save this year is going to help us long term, and that's important to know. I understand we do need to grow the taxable grand list, but we make these short-term deals on bonding, and then it turns out, for example, Joe Ganim, when he was mayor before, had a $350 million bond that he got, and it's going to cost us over the life of it $900 million. So there's just, you have to think long-term in terms of what we're getting the taxpayer on the hook for before we go for the easy money, or seemingly easy money that fits our political cycle. In terms of small business incubators that Christina was alluding to, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the idea, too, of having a business management program that's framed at Housatonic Community College, Fairfield, the resources we have around us could come together, and they are coming together. I've spoken to Richard DuPont at Housatonic Community College about their advanced manufacturing training. It pulls in promising students from high schools, gives them more math, more support, and it walks them all the way through to great jobs.
Last question.
If elected, you guys are going to be given a $9,000 stipend. What do you plan on doing with it?
Scott? There will be closing statements.
Right now, what I use my stipend on basically is printer paper and ink, and we do also attend the National League of Cities conferences, and I have found those to be really beneficial for me in terms of finding some payback. And one thing I brought back, and I just found out from our sustainability director, is that one of the programs I recommended to him is about electric car charging stations, and they want to come to Bridgeport and install them, and we're in negotiation about where that's going to go. So that might have been, you know, a couple $1,000s over a couple of years, but I think that's going to pay itself back.
As little as possible. This is a volunteer position, and these are for costs that are for the office of of city council. I would work to also make the expenditures a little more transparent. I would make sure that the public knows what city councilors are spending their stipend on, and I would ask that the finance department put together a outline of what exactly is allowable, because I know there are some folks that spend things that are in the gray area about whether they should be allowed or not. So I would ask for an outline from the finance department about what exactly is allowable.
I think we need a quarterly newsletter and quarterly meetings, and to do that, we should have at least 2 high school students, possibly a college student from the district, who apply to work for us as interns, and we should pay them no more than a budget of $1,500 a year. And they would learn more about government, we would learn more about from them, and together we'd put together a good communication. I think it would be worth it. I think it would be beneficial to the district. Anything we spend on stipend, we will report in our quarterly newsletter. So that if you see something funny, like why am I paying to go out to lunch with Steve Staffstrom? I mean, he and I should be able to afford our own meal, right? I can call him up on the phone. Then you can ask me, and I can say, actually, it was really important. We were up in Hartford talking about something that was late at night. The other thing is, in our small business that I have, my wife Kate, a graphic design business, I have to be in touch with people in New Zealand and India and all over the country, the world. And I do that by Skype, by internet, and it works great. And I'd love to go to New Zealand and have a great trip, but I can't afford it. So I don't think I need to go on any junkets to learn things that I can't learn from Bridgeport. Thank you.
To echo some of what Pete said, I'd actually like to have someone help with doing some of the analysis of the figures. I've tried doing it just by typing in numbers. That takes up a lot of time. So having someone to help do some of the analysis of the city's data would be helpful. And also, just maybe I'd like to just educate myself, but for example, when we have real estate deals coming before us, I'd like to get some more education to really understand the details behind those. The tax abatements, how developers are looking at their profits and their returns, and trying to figure out ways that we can both work with the developers but not lose on the city's side as well.
Okay, as the result, the coin toss at the beginning, we'll now have the closing statements from each side. As the Smith-Spain ticket, in whichever order you choose, have up to 3 minutes each.
3 weeks from today is our Democratic primary. I like to think of it as Accountability Day. This September 12th, when you step up to vote, ask yourself, are you being represented in City Hall? Are your property taxes lower than they were 2 years ago? Are we doing better for our youth, inside and outside the classroom? And are our roads and sidewalks getting better? How about the reputation of our city as a place to live, to work, to invest, and to thrive? The change we need will not come from people who approve a disastrous budget and a tax increase that strangles our community and then characterize themselves as proud to have fought for it. I'm sorry. Christina and I believe we offer a clear change for the better. To that point, we are circulating our personally signed Promise to You document tonight, so you can take it home and see what we're committing ourselves to be accountable to you. So if you elect us to the City Council, we're committed to upholding everything we have put in here and to our diverse community. And we're going to, like I said, issue quarterly reports and host regular quarterly meetings throughout the district. Let's communicate so that we can be better connected and make real, measurable change. Our word matters to us, and we owe it to you. If you elect us on September 12th, we will be accountable to you. Thank you.
Just echoing some of what Pete has said and what I said in the beginning. In terms of my candidacy for City Council, I just want people to know that I'm going into this very much independent and really wanting to understand before making decisions. I don't think there's any silver bullet in terms of solving the many issues that the city has, but I'm a person that likes to to study things, to understand them. I'll give the example, I recently took a human anatomy and biology class. I had a friend pass away from brain cancer, and my mom suffers from hypertension, and my way of understanding and moving forward of things is to really try to understand it. And that is the spirit in which I would be going into being a city council person. And I will also add, just because I've heard this a lot on the campaign trail, and because again, I do tend to be a person that stays at home, is that a lot of people think that I am quiet. It's not that I am quiet. I speak up when I have something important to say or that I think can add value. And I'm more of just a listener and person that wants to understand before making any kind of brash statements. I've already emphasized the age thing, and I just say that because I know a lot of people think, okay, she's young and she's green, but I do have a lot of experience, and I think that's something that's also of value in terms of my experiences in life, both having lived in Bridgeport and understanding that experience, both having gone to Jamaica basically, almost every year of my life, and seeing how people there, i.e. my family, lives. Whether it's like sometimes not having running water, and this was as recent as 2 years ago, but this was something that was just normal because my family's from a small area. So that ability to relate to a variety of people. I went to high school in Fairfield actually, because my mom was working there as a live-in at the time. So I've also had that experience in a different demographic, socioeconomic demographic. But the point being is that I am going to try to be the most as well-rounded in terms of understanding perspectives, and I hope that everyone will take that into consideration come election day. Thank you.
In closing, let me reinforce why you should vote for me and Rowan as your representatives in the City Council. And let me say I'm the optimist in the room. I believe in Bridgeport, I believe in Black Rock, and I believe the future belongs to us. Many people look at Bridgeport and they see nothing but liabilities. But when I look at Bridgeport, I see a tremendous array of assets that no other community has. We have 17 miles of waterfront property that we're working hard to reclaim as a vital hub for economic development, family recreation, community building, and sustainability through the Waterfront Bridgeport Initiative. Our abundant capacity of dormant industrial sites that can be and have been already repurposed for small technology startups, alternative energy sources, indoor farming, and other creative, innovative ideas. And our youth. We have 21,000 students in this city, and they want to grow up and make something of their lives just like any kid anywhere, and it just needs the opportunities and structures to move forward, and that's something I am committed to. This may sound like a starry-eyed view of our city, but to make real progress, we need to look at the opportunities before us through an optimistic lens. And with that optimism, I have reached out to all kinds of leaders in this community, business, education, government, and I've been able to forge those relationships by putting forth my personality, my integrity, and who I am to serve this district as best as I can. And optimism doesn't mean that we can't look with skepticism on how this administration may function or fall short when we need to hold them accountable. I have met any number of times, not just publicly, but behind the scenes with administration officials to say, what's the story? What's really going on? And again, I've built those relationships where I can go there and get an honest answer from somebody when I can look them one-on-one in the eye and say, what's really going on? Let me also say, lastly, to the families who've lived in Black Rock for generation after generation. They've built a tremendous legacy here in Black Rock, and as a relative newcomer, I'm grateful for what they've created and want to do my best to preserve the legacy that they have left here. I also promised to work my tail off when I got elected 2 years ago, and I can go to sleep every night feeling very good that I have worked my tail off. You may not see every result everywhere, but there is no way you can disparage my efforts and my concern and my love for Black Rock. Being positive, building positive relationships and coalitions, and coming up with solutions is exactly why I want to continue as your council representative with my partner here, the young Dem, Rowan Kane. He represents the youthful energy, fresh insights, and hard work that is needed to move this city forward. It's not about yesteryear, it's about tomorrow. Thank you.
So thanks again to John. Thanks again to the Black Rock Library for hosting us. All the issues that we talked about here tonight are kind of important in their own way. And there may be some differences on policies, but I think our values up here are pretty similar. And I think we share a vision for Bridgeport. And we see a Bridgeport that has every opportunity to become an engine for our state's economy. We see a Bridgeport that is slowly, however slowly, making some important progress, but a community that feels left out of a decision-making process. That fundamentally their voices aren't being heard in city government. That needs to change. Earlier tonight I said every elected official's job is twofold: to work to get the best possible policy outcomes for their constituents and for their communities, and to serve their constituents. Out of the doors on the past several weeks, I've seen Scott's passion for both of those. I want to continue the fights that Scott has waged alongside residents of the Bridgeport Towers to improve what are quite simply unacceptable living conditions. And on the council, I know Scott has gained the respect of his colleagues for his reason and his pragmatism. Do I think Pete and Christina have some good ideas for the city? Absolutely, absolutely. But the reason I'm running is that I believe Scott and I would make the best team for this community, from Ames Boulevard to Howard Ave. I've worked with politicians and activists and community leaders all over the state. I know what it takes to succeed and to be successful in local government. It takes focus, it takes persistence, and above all, it takes a passion for your community. And I do love this community. It's diverse, it's vibrant, and I believe that thanks to groups like the Young Dems and Bridgeport Gen Now and so many others, I Love Bridgeport, that we are making real progress in the city. But to make sure that progress continues and is sustainable, we have to stand up to this administration when we think it's wrong, but we have to work with it when we think it's right, because opposing the mayor just because his name's Joe Ganim is not a policy position. We will do everything in our power, Scott and I, to make the council, to make the administration, and to make all of city government accountable to its citizens. I'm asking for your vote on September 12th because this city has enormous potential to succeed in the coming years. But to take advantage of that potential needs fresh ideas, it needs new energy, it needs a proactive approach to government. And we need that government to be accountable and transparent to its citizens, because what is a city if not the people that live there? Thank you for coming out tonight, and I hope I can earn your support on September 12th.
Okay, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. I may not work in Black Rock anymore, but I still live here, and now I know where I live. Vote. What are we going to vote for? Vote. Good friends.